Hello, hockey fans. The Hardcore Puckhead is here with a recap of the last week in action. We're in the middle of March. We're heading towards the middle of March now, and the playoff races are intensifying. The Calgary Flames, who are they on a roll? At one point entering yesterday, they were in second place in the Pacific Division. The Flames have won 9 straight, but the Ducks' victory over the Capitals last night pushed them back down to third. But that's still pretty good considering they started this past week in the wild card picture. Now all of a sudden Edmonton's falling off a bit. They're in the wild card picture as the standings here show. And Edmonton suffered a terrible loss yesterday to the Canadiens at home. They were up 1-0, but they gave up 2 goals in the minute 9, and 2 empty netters sealed it. So Montreal's win moved them back to first place. Ottawa was actually leading the Atlantic entering last night. So there's a good chance that the Senators could win the Atlantic. I don't think the Senators won a division title in close to a decade, a little over a decade. But Ottawa is on a roll. They're 6-0 this month, and it's a back and forth race between the neighboring, well, not the neighboring cities, but the neighboring city of Ottawa, which is on the Ontario Quebec border. But they have that French-Canadian connection too, so that's gonna be a hell of a rivalry, and could end up being the Atlantic Division final, one win, regardless of where they finish. But yeah, Montreal, they got that big win to move back into first, but Ottawa is streaking 6 straight wins. Onto another Ontario team, the Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs entered today, holding the second wildcard position, which will set them up with a meeting against whoever wins the Metropolitan. I say that because the Metropolitan race has become quite tight because Washington is free falling. The Capitals have lost 4 in a row, and Pittsburgh has won 5 straight. There's a 1-point difference between Ovechkin's Caps and Crosby's Penguins, and that should all come to a head. I think it's going to need the entire 27 remaining days to decide this. It would be something if Pittsburgh ends up winning the Metropolitan and Washington is reduced to only hosting most likely Columbus or New York, or the Rangers I should say, and heading on the road to face Pittsburgh should they win their series. Ooh, that's going to be a huge free fall. Ovechkin's cursed. I've said that before, but he is. Sunday also featured a very important game between the Wild and the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks beat the Wild 4-2, so now there's a 1-point difference there. Of course, Minnesota and Chicago have the 2 highest point totals in the Western Conference, so who knows what could happen. And as I said, the Blues have been winning lately. They've won 4 in a row, as the standings show, but they're still in that second wild card position. So races are getting tight. San Jose still has a pretty good, decent cushion in the Pacific, 7 points ahead of Anaheim. Both the Metropolitan and Atlantic are close. The Metropolitan separated by 1 point. The Central separated by 1 point. And the Atlantic separated by 2. And it kind of used to be a close 3-team race, but Boston's kind of trailed off a bit there. They're still 7 points out, but they're in 3rd place. They're 8 points out, but they're in 3rd place, barely hanging on to that. Toronto could pass them, you never know. And the wild card race to the East is still very tight. Though Philadelphia took a big hit on Saturday when they lost late to Boston. They gave up the game-winning goal was scored with 5.6 seconds left, and as I said on Twitter at Clyde E. Dawkins, as I said on Twitter, stuff like that is the reason why Philly is in this position. There are 3 teams ahead of them in the playoff race, but they're only 6 points out. I mean, 6 points isn't a lot. 6 points isn't a lot. That's 3 wins. That's 3 wins, which is 1/3 of Calgary's current winning streak. But if a team keeps losing when they need to win, 6 points can seem like a far journey. 6 points can seem like 20 when you keep losing close games like that. Though Philly does have a shot. Philly has a shot. Florida, Buffalo have shots. Only Detroit and the Devils seem to be, well, they're not screwed, but they're on life support. Detroit and the Devils, hard to believe that was the Stanley Cup final in 1995. Now here they are in the same conference and entering with about 4 weeks left. They're at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. As I said before, Detroit's playoff streak could end. And races are kind of tight. Well, it's not that close in the West. It's kind of a 2-team race, maybe 3. I'm being generous by saying Winnipeg has a shot, even though they're 9 points behind St. Louis. But despite that, though, St. Louis failed to beat Winnipeg at all this season. So that's hockey for you. But St. Louis, the Kings are neck and neck in the wild card race, and they play each other tonight at Staples. The plot thickens. And so as of now, here are the possible playoff matchups. Of course, these are subject to change, as standings often do. The Central's 2-3 matchup looks like is slated to be Chicago and Nashville. And with the wild cards, St. Louis has the bottom wild card spot, so they would face Minnesota. That means it would be San Jose and Edmonton, and Anaheim and Calgary in the Pacific half part of the bracket. In the East, Toronto would face the top team in the East, which is Washington. So it looks like the best record in the East is going to be the Metropolitan. Toronto will cross over to the Metropolitan quarter of the bracket and face Washington. Pittsburgh and Columbus will face each other. In the Atlantic, the Rangers will switch over to the Atlantic part of the bracket and face Montreal. That's going to be delicious. And Ottawa face Boston. So the West would have no crossovers. The East would have a double crossover, which is still yet to happen in the NHL. But so that's pretty much the story so far. Blues and Kings tonight. That's a big game. And what else is on here? Rangers and Tampa. That's huge too. I mentioned Philly. They have Columbus. Now Columbus is still strong, even though they've fallen off a bit. So Philly can't afford to lose this game. Winnipeg's in Nashville tonight. Calgary looks to go for 10 straight, but they're going up against the defending Stanley Cup champions. Boston's playing Vancouver, who's mainly screwed. Montreal plays tomorrow. They have the Blackhawks. That's going to be good. That's on NBC Sports Network. Tampa Bay has Ottawa tomorrow night. However, the best chance is a head-to-head meeting. The head-to-head meeting between Montreal and Ottawa takes place on Saturday, March 18th, my 32nd birthday, in the Canadian capital. All eyes will be glued to that, especially mine. So that is the recap for this week. Some very important games. Well, they're all important, but very important close games are coming up this week. And like I said, Montreal and Ottawa head-to-head on Saturday. Ottawa's kind of had their number this year, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens this upcoming Saturday. Until then, in case any teams clinch this week, I'll post a congratulatory video. But if not, I'll be back on I'll be back next week with a recap of what's happened this week. So until then, and good day, fellow puckheads.